Just about every confidence gag had been tried on old Voucht except the elixir of youth. Only this was different. Professor Barr had a unique pitch on it, but Buck had the real goods. Me and a guy named Hermes Trismegistus take care of the situation when Jody gets in a very tight place. This guy Trismegistus is anyways 1,000 years old, if he's alive anywhere, and I am 16, but we cooperate. The tight place is caused by Professor Henry Barr, who urgent regrets the matter later on, and by Mr. Voucht, who was an elderly bootlegger baron in the dear dead days. He still has bodyguards hanging around him bloodthirsty. If you think an old guy like Mr. Voucht can't figure in a tight place, he's got some tough-looking goons around, and a yacht, and a private island estate and other trimmings. All I got to say is, you never met Mr. Voucht. Old Jody gets into it because he thinks it will top off his career. Pride. He is the party who once worked a handkerchief switch on Ma Mandelbaum, who I understand was the biggest lady fence in the world in her day, and wasn't to be swindled by an amateur. He also once sells a gold brick to the United States Mint in Denver, Colorado. And once he persuades the police department of a certain fair city that he is a Fed man with a tip-off on a bank robbery that is going to take place. He has every cop in town ambushed around that bank that night, while he lurks inside with a Tommy gun, waiting for the bold, bad burglars that never arrive. He acts much embarrassed next morning. But a couple of days later, the liquid assets of the bank turn up in the mail addressed to him, because he has spent those long hours packing them neat in manila envelopes and mailing them in the mail slot that is in the bank for the convenience of depositors. But still, Jody feels that taking Mr. Voucht over the hurdles will crown his career. Mr. Voucht was a very big shot once when his business staff included not only income tax men and Tommy gun experts, but also gentlemen who specialize in putting people in barrels of concrete and dumping them in the Chicago River. I meet old Jody when I am thumbing a ride towards the coast. I have beat it from what you might call home after my old man works me over with a chair for spending money I earned on a gas engine for a model aeroplane instead of giving it to him to get drunk on. I am not making out so good at hitchhiking because, being 16 and not looking any older, I have to dodge truant officers everywhere, but I get by. I fix a car radio for a guy at a filling station while old Jody is having his gas tank filled up, and the guy says swell and gives me $50. The job I done would have cost him $12.60 at a regular repair shop. I says I could do with a lift to Phoenix, but the guy isn't going that way. Then old Jody wheezes cordial that he is, so I climb in his car. He is fat and old and has dangling red wattles, and he looks like he is made of money and hasn't a care in the world. Outside of having the cops of 16 or 18 states passionate interested in his whereabouts, he doesn't have no worries, and looking like $1 million is his business. But I don't know that then. He talks to me cordial, and we get on to science, a subject in which he is interested but don't know beans about. With him asking questions, grunting and respectful, I tell him the theoretic perfect fuel for spaceships and the difference between a rocket and a jet and what the Doppler effect is and what's the difference between Oak Ridge and Hansford, Washington. I'm not showing off, you know. I explain that I read a lot of science magazines and he ought to try them, especially the science fiction ones. And I tell him I'm heading for the coast to get a job in a radio repair shop like I had back home after school on Saturdays, and I'm going to save up and have a private experimental laboratory. I got some ideas, science fiction ideas, that I think I can make work out actual. Old Jody gets thoughtful. Later on, when I know him better, I will know what that means. Right then, though, when he beams and says he would like to play a joke on a friend, and I seem a handy young man with tools, I just say modest that I'm pretty fair. He makes me a proposition. He'll stake me to grub and hotel expenses and a suit of clothes and say I'm his nephew if I'll fix him a trick television cabinet with a movie sound projector inside so he can fool a friend into thinking he's got a long-distance receiver that'll pick up from anywhere. I can do that with my hands tied behind my back. I take him up quick. I improve the idea. I suggest color film, which will look like three-color television in action. Mr. Voucht don't have anything to do with this deal. Neither does the prof, who at that time is fumbling happy with a swell idea that he doesn't know how good it is. This is Phoenix, Arizona. So old Jody buys the stuff I say is needed. He acts like he is made of money, and I put it together in the hotel room he gets for me next to his. It's a swell hotel, the best in town, and I eat fancy grub that I don't know the names of, being you have to order it in French. When the job's finished, I figure on thumbing my way further, but old Jody says perish the thought. He will put me on salary as his technical assistant. He waddles around town, wheezing and busy, while I catch up on my science reading. I'm knee-deep in magazines when he comes tiptoeing into the room and says joyous that his joke worked and he's beaten it before his friend gets wise. So we light out, and he chuckles happy all the way up to Sun Valley, which is considerable of a ride, where he says he would like to rest a few days. When I get to know him better, I find out that he shows what was apparently three-color television to some sharp businessmen in Phoenix. They get together and pull a fast business deal on him and swindle him excessive by paying him only $20,000 for all rights in an epoch-making discovery. Which, when they find out they've been stuck, they can't say a word because their methods are at least unethical, if not illegal. Old Jody soaks up sun and fancier grub than ever at Sun Valley, which isn't a very swank place indeed, but I get restless. Then one day, he comes in chuckling and says that he will have great fun with his friend, the president of Western Power, if I can contrive something that looks like it is a receiver of beamed or wireless power. And can it be done? I says it'll be phony, but if he wants a laugh, okay. So I make us out with a couple of Thiatron tubes and this and that, and it looks just like a science fiction illustration. But the power it delivers, so impressive, comes from storage batteries built into the workbench it's built on. I would like to see him play his joke, but he says no. I sneak a look in the window anyhow, and I get the picture. I don't hear the actual dealing, but Western Power pays him plenty for full ownership of the gadget, with the agreement that they are going to smash it right where it sets and not try to have bad dreams about what it would do to their business. We leave Sun Valley with old Jody on top of the world and beaming at me affectionate. I've got wise now, and I talk to him stern. He is upset, but he tells me the story of his life. He gets proud of it as he goes along, with all about how he pulls the handkerchief switch on Ma Mandelbaum and the gold brick and the Denver Mint and all the rest. It is a very adventurous career he describes, and it even has glamour. Then, he promises that if I stay on as his technical assistant, I can have a private experimental laboratory of my own, and he will leave me in the clear in all dealings. So I settle down to planning what I'm going to have and how I'm going to use it. I expect to set up my laboratory in Las Lagunas, where we are heading. Las Lagunas is another swank place, with all the bills of fare in French and the prices looking like Army-Navy estimates. I send for lab supply catalogs and start hunting for a place to set up shop. Then Jody, who has been circulating social, wheezing happy and contagious, says apprehensive that I better not plan on the lab here, because we may have to move. I ask why. He says he has met Mr. Voucht, and to top off his career, he's got an ambition to pull over a fast one on him. After that, he says, he will retire and devote the rest of his life to supervising my education. I am not keen on having my education supervised, but Jody explains that Mr. Voucht is the one guy who has put it over on everybody, and nobody has ever put anything over on him. He is famous from Prohibition days. He even beats the income tax rap the feds try to pin on him when they despair of linking him with missing persons they think are in barrels of concrete at the bottom of the Chicago River. Mr. Voucht is completely surrounded by lawyers and personal physicians. He is 70 and keeps his old bodyguards out of sentiment, wears dark spectacles, and has a most unpleasant hobby. He owns a yacht, an island, and several $1 million, but his hobby is getting people to try to swindle him and then sending them to jail. He is very respectable now, says Jody, and a good many artistic swindlers have worked on him, but he does not appreciate their artistry. It is a challenge, says old Jody. It will be something to remember in his declining years, Jody says, if he nicks Mr. Voucht for a role and gets away with it. If I will postpone my laboratory until he is through with Mr. Voucht, he will buy me an 18-foot sailboat that I can have personal, and I can loaf around in it while business goes on. I make the deal. The price of my laboratory is climbing as I think of more things I would like to have. I figure if Jody gets rich enough, maybe I can nick him for a small-sized cyclotron and have some fun. Meanwhile, a sailboat won't be bad. I get it. I do have fun. I have never heard of Hermes Trismegistus. I have never heard of Paracelsus, or Dr. D, or Dr. Faustus, or Nicholas Flamel, or any of those guys. I have never heard of Professor Henry Barr. But I learned to sail my boat pretty good, and I'm happy planning my laboratory. But old Jody loses his carefree look. He gets absent-minded and fretful. One day, he confides his woes to me. I'm afraid, he wheezes pathetic, that I am losing my grip, Buck. I know Mr. Voucht well. We are on confidential terms. He thinks I'm a retired banker, and he has confided to me all about his hobby and tells me with grim amusement about the various sucker baits he has been invited to fall for. And I cannot contrive a scheme to offer him. Every type of enterprise the mind of man can invent has been tried on him. The most refined of financial shenanigans have failed. He's on to everything. I say, yeah? I would like to be helpful. That laboratory is going to cost money. An electron telescope ain't cheap. I need for Jody to be prosperous to keep his promise. He has opened his files to me, said Jody, wrinkling up his fat face like a baby trying not to cry. All the games he has pretended to fall for, with the news clippings of the trials and sentencing of the operators. He even has the records of the parole board hearings on them and how he has protested the freeing of such criminals. That file is most informative. There are a couple of twists that even I have never heard of before. The greatest artists in the business have worked on him, Buck. It would be an artistic triumph to diddle him. Indeed, I could not rest easy in my grave without having a try at him. I bet, I says, that if he ever does fall, it'll be for something a 3-year-old would laugh at. I don't know why I say it, but Jody's mouth drops open. He blinks at me, and suddenly he begins to wheeze happy again. Genius, he says. That's the trick. Now I start hunting for the oldest, stalest, most impossible trick in the world. Something so old and phony nobody would think of trying it. I think, Buck, that as my technical assistant, you show genius. He struts out, a fat little guy with sporty clothes who looks like a retired banker without a worry in the world. And around this time, a new crop of science magazines appears on the newsstands. I buy the lot of them and loaf around in my sailboat, reading them and making plans. End of chapter 1.